Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you by both the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, both of which are pushing the boundaries in this digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Pearcy, and this episode is on small business cloud accounting software. And I'm joined today by Toon, who's going to help me run through this and digest and compare and contrast the different software in this space. So let's crack on. I guess firstly, John, what software should we be considering in this space, mate?
Well, thanks, Ryan, for that. I guess the typical sort of products that most people will be familiar with in this kind of space will be the likes of Xero, Sage Business Cloud Accounting, QuickBooks Online, Free Agent, Cashflow, and then probably a couple of others that maybe people are aware of, like Zoho and FreshBooks. I guess you can't avoid some of these products. They're either there in TV advertising on the tube, etc. And of course, for most accountants, they'll have probably picked one of these products over the others for a number of different reasons, which I'm sure we'll explore.
Yeah, definitely. And what we need to make clear is there are more products than this, but we are specifically avoiding certain areas. One, where they're too small, such as those that are coconut, aimed at kind of those individual sole trader businesses. We're looking at kind of small business corporate partnership piece of software. And those that you kind of move into the mid-tier space, or at least touching into that area, such as Accounts IQ, Exact Online, iPlicit, and the likes of Twinfield. Those we can cover in a completely different session. We're focusing on what we're going to define as small business accounting software and the ones that John ran through. But how do we compare? How do we contrast these? Because that is a very subjective and a hot topic area. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people disagreeing with what we say here, but we're going to try and cover a few, areas of functionality that we can contrast across the different products. Ones that I think are worth comparing are the user interface, the UI, the usability of the system, the scalability of it, like can you grow through that system and when do you need to move on to something else? The support, like is it ticketed system, is it phone system, kind of how is their support, how has it been through the years? The app ecosystem, is it, I guess it's known, or the kind of app stores if you got the Xero route, and then reporting, and that one is incredibly subjective. So we'll see how we go. We can compare and contrasting in that area. But let's start on user interface, probably one of the most subtle that you can kind of delve into. But a lot of it's going to be on how easy is it to navigate, how is it to click through. John, across the ones that I guess you talked about first, how do you think, or which products do you think stand out from a user interface perspective?
I think for me, Xero does and has been for a long time probably one of the standouts in this space. This can be very subjective, but I think they do make navigating around the products and minimizing clicks to get to something a real priority. I also am a big fan of Free Agent. I think navigating around Free Agent is really simple and easy to use. And I think one of my tests for this is, I don't come at it as an accountant necessarily. I come at it as someone with a business and sort of going, right, I know that I want to do something. It might be raising an invoice. It might be doing the bank reconciliation. It might be trying to report. Is it really easy and obvious for me to be able to do that? And those two products definitely stand out as two that make a big difference.
Definitely. I think you got that perfectly right. Is that how does the business feel about this? Because I've had people that are, from a finance background come and go, I hate the kind of the feel of Xero. They love the detail, I guess how intuitive it was compared to an old system they were used to, whereas the likes of Xero and Free Agent have tried to completely change that. And you will, if you're experienced with traditional finance software, you may find the likes of QuickBooks Online or Sage Business Cloud more appealing because of the navigation styles in that. But yeah, I would say that they've changed it. And the other thing I would say, right, is pop-ups. I hate pop-ups. I hate the slowdown of them. And some systems, like especially early on, QuickBooks Online's pop-ups that will come up like just frustrated the heck out of me. I know where I'm going. I know what I want to do. Stop pinging things at me. It just annoyed the heck out of me. So
Sorry, I was just going to say, to be fair, that's one area that Xero are sort of slowly creeping into with their recommended apps. And that is a concern, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So that's UI, very subjective and hard to, I guess, put your finger on. But usability, I guess, what functions does it have? What functions does it not have? We could kind of delve into these in a lot of detail here. But I think one of the things that we can say from the start here is they've actually become quite similar now. Where they were defining and standing out, they've actually got most of the same usability, most of the same functions. Is there any, I guess, or any specific areas you think from one of the apps that stands out over any others in this space?
To be honest, I don't think there is. I wholeheartedly agree with you in terms of what you were saying. I mean, I think if you'd wound the clock back definitely 10 years, maybe even 5 years, there were distinct differences between the core products. And Xero obviously had things like Find and Recode, which I remember people standing up and whooping and cheering when they announced that at XeroCon. That as a feature has been sort of replicated by a lot of the other products in the market now. Free agent with the ability to be able to sort of track some of the taxes as you're going through preparing the accounts. That is probably one area where they are better than the other products in terms of having that all-encompassing, all-in-one view. But again, we know that the likes of Xero with Xero Tax are chasing them down that path. So are QuickBooks as well, and some of the others. So, in terms of core usability, and can you run your business? Can you run your management accounts? Can you see reports and run your purchase and sales ledger? There is fundamentally nothing between them. And for me, I know we're going to talk about this, but for me, the real differentiator between these products now is in their app ecosystem and what you're able to scale out of the core product by utilizing functionality that's available elsewhere.
Definitely. I think there are some areas that the individual products will stand out slightly. Like I think the Xero's, bank reconciliation screen is probably the best in the market. I think Sage's ability to kind of check VAT calculations and VAT anomalies, is a really good little standout feature they've got. You talked about Find and Recode. There's little tools inside them that I guess think stand out, but overall, you're going to get peaks and troughs, and they're pretty much the same nowadays. And then you've got scalability, right? How does the product scale? Can you start really micro and scale up? And personally, I think the one that does best in this space is probably QuickBooks Online, especially since they released QuickBooks Online Advanced. I know some of them have also tried to release the smaller products, but you've got QuickBooks Self-Employed. And so you do kind of need to migrate from Self-Employed into the fuller product, but still you're going from tiny all the way up. Do you think any of the others are challenging well in that space?
I think probably the only other one that would challenge, QuickBooks Online is Zoho. I think Zoho is probably one of these products where if you start bolting on so many other things that are within the Zoho product sphere, they've been very much like Intuit in terms of acquiring good products and then kind of melding it into the main part of the product. That's probably one that you could really scale quite significantly with. What they probably miss, ironically, is they probably miss that very small gap that a lot of the other products cover in terms of if you're a really small business, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going straight into Zoho, but it might be a scaling product. Whereas the likes of Xero, QuickBooks Online, etc., you can always go into as a small business without too much going wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I think that also pivots really well into what we're talking about with the app ecosystem, because Zoho's approached it differently, haven't they? They've got a modern ERP in a box, haven't they? You can kind of pick and choose and bring in different bits of functionality. And a lot of businesses that I talk to, if they've started on the Zoho route early on, they stay with it because they can scale, they can add on things as they grow. That's not always the case if you're a Xero, QuickBooks Online, Sage Business Cloud kind of user. And so then you move into, well, how do we build out? How do we make the product better than just the ledger, the finance ledger? And that's where those app ecosystems, app stores come in. And although Xero was, I guess, the pioneer to some extent in this space, they've kind of grown across all of them. Do we still think that the Xero App Store is probably the best one in the market?
I would say probably yes. I mean, Zoho, because they've got a history of being a CRM product, probably has the most comprehensive in terms of the number of apps that you can plug into it. But I think in terms of if we're talking about accounting and finance related apps, they're not as prevalent as they are in the Xero ecosystem. And so Xero I do still think leads the charge. And I think Xero has this strange advantage that typically in most places, if you're a looking to build a product to go into a finance space. In the same way that if you're a normal app developer, you tend to develop for Apple first and then go for like Android afterwards. I think Xero still sort of stands a little bit in front of everyone else. I guess the only time that's ever changes is if you're operating more in the North American market, where you're given Intuit's scale and market share over there, that you do see that app developers will tend to go for Intuit first, which makes logical sense, and then maybe go for Xero second. But it's really a matter of where you are in the world and geography in terms of either it's Xero first and QuickBooks second, or it's QuickBooks first and Xero second.
Yeah, and I guess we're not mentioning Sage Business Cloud in that because they were just so, I guess, late to the market from regarding the App Store that most, as you say, do build Xero first, QuickBooks Online, and then Sage Business Cloud. And now, kind of Free Agent, where it used to be a closed-off system similar to Cashflow, they're now building out, and that's what's, I guess, making it a lot more interesting to me.
Well, I think the race between Cashflow and Sage is going to be fascinating to watch, right? Because if you think about if you ignore Xero and QuickBooks with 2,000 odd integrations in their formal stores or the formal spaces, and then a whole bunch of informal unregulated ones, whatever how you want to describe them. I think last count for Sage Business Cloud, there were about 120 apps that connected into that. Free Agent aren't too far off on that, and they've publicly stated over the last 12 months at least, maybe 18 months, that they are looking to build out that app ecosystem for themselves to kind of try and push themselves into a more mainstream part of the market, away from the where they were originally sort of targeting, which was the freelancer and sort of contractor type sectors. And so in order to do that, they do have to hook into these other products. And I think one of the things that really goes for them is that when you talk to developers, Free Agent in particular have a really high quality API, and people enjoy building into that and connecting to their product.
Yeah, similar to the Xero one, right? People tend to find it easier to build into Xero than likes of QuickBooks Online and Sage Business Cloud, hence why they tend to go into it first. But yeah, I mean, there's so much out there from what's in the market. I tend to find if you're a business and you're trying to identify the right system, you do have to consider, well, what is the operational system I want to use, and what's the best integration from a finance system that I need. Sometimes, especially if the products come across from the US over to the UK, then you want to go with QuickBooks Online integration. There's usually deeper. If it's coming across from, I guess, the Australasia side, then you're going to go more likely from a Xero perspective. All right, we could talk forever about our app ecosystems. As you say, there's thousands of choice there, and it goes quite deep. But other area that we've mentioned was support. So I'm going to throw this out to you, John, because I've got some quite, I guess, passionate opinions on the support on some of these products. What do you think works from a support side for different apps?
I would say first and foremost, your experience of support really depends on what type of a user of the products you are, and also, whether or not sometimes you're pushing those products to the limit. But I mean, look, Sage and both QuickBooks are really well known for having high quality support, particularly things like telephone support as well as email and other things. And that makes a big difference. And I really, I get that people really appreciate the ability to be able to pick up a phone and discuss a problem with someone and try and get it resolved over the phone. Free Agent have something similar. I believe Zoho do as well. I've never tried it, never used it. And the likes of FreshBooks and Cashflow tend to have more of an online support like Xero do, which can cause its own problems. And you can kind of see Xero have reacted to the feedback, I guess, that they've had, which I think you've probably contributed to, Ryan, in terms of you've now got that ability to add a phone number, haven't you, when you put a request in, so they can sort of call you back. How effective that system is I think is still to be tested to a degree, but obviously it's clearly different from just being able to pick up the phone and hopefully getting the phone answered within a matter of seconds or minutes. I guess the challenge is if you don't want to be in the space of being like HMRC, where you pick up the phone and you're still on the phone for an hour waiting for someone to actually pick up and fix your problem, because that isn't support, and you might as well just do it online.
Yeah, completely agree. Right, I think it's going to be no secret that the worst feature of Xero for quite a while in the past was their support service, but it has massively improved. And I've found we don't need to talk to Xero that often, but when we're talking to them, it's usually something quite technical, and we can get to someone that knows what we're asking a lot more quickly now. They're being passed around internally. You can just feel that in the past. But I agree, if you are someone that needs a lot of support and you don't have an accountant that's great on the software, you want to be going down that Sage Business Cloud, QuickBooks Online, because of the beauty of the phone support. All right, and now let's touch on probably the most divisive of areas, which is reporting. Right, it's very subjective. I know I personally, and I'm going to talk about Xero first. I personally love the new Xero reporting. There are accountants that hate the new Xero reporting and love the old Xero reporting, and that's not even talking about the other products out there. So it's something that we can touch on, we can kind of talk about, but I know this is going to be an opinion rather than a fact. John, what are the tools do you like the reporting on?
I mean, I must admit, I don't like reporting in QuickBooks. I find it a frustrating experience. Sage Business Cloud does have good reports, and particularly if you've moved from like the sort of Sage 50 ecosystem, you've got a lot of reports that you'd be familiar with, and there's a plethora of reports. I do get a little bit overwhelmed by that in terms of, I find it a little bit frustrating when people sort of say, oh, we've got, 50 reports out of the box. Because, I'm not entirely sure how many reports your typical business owner needs, but I'm fairly certain it's probably not 50. And of course, as accountants, the accountants versus business owners, you've probably got different reporting requirements and needs. So I do think it is very much a personal thing. I think, sometimes it's really just a matter of trying the products out and seeing what's what in terms of, how do those reports look and feel and how can you interact with them. I think that's fundamentally a key part of it, is like, can you actually from a report, for example, click through to the originating transactions and be able to see all of that? Because that's not always possible with all of the products. And even just how do you build a report in terms of, sometimes, clearly a P&L report, relatively straightforward, but then you've got options within that in terms of, do you want this month versus last month? Do you want this year versus last year? Do you want, the last 3 months, for example? How easy is it to actually do that intuitively with as few clicks as possible? I think that's one of the things that is really challenging for the vendors to build and produce for us. And I'm personally, I don't think anyone's absolutely nailed it. I think in the old days, Xero did lead that field, but I think since some of the changes they've made, and also as other people have caught up, I actually think it's still a bit of an open goal for someone to try and get at. And I think that also explains why in the ecosystem, which I know we're not necessarily talking about, but I think that's why there are so many reporting apps in the ecosystem, because I think people do kind of look at the baked-in reporting functionality of a lot of these products and go, that's great, but all it does is it gives me numbers, and it's not that engaging, and that's why the reporting apps tend to be have a bit more to them.
John, that was a perfect summary. I don't think there's anything else I can add to that, because you pretty much mimicked exactly what I thought, and tend to, as you say, we tend to go with the reporting apps to sit on top, especially if you want to change the way you think about it. And I love Fathom. I love the fact that it drives KPI reporting rather than the standard kind of P&L balance sheet. Focus on what drives the business. That's what I care about from a reporting perspective. All right, we could talk forever about all the different, comparisons, different ways of slicing the data, different ways of looking at the products, but we don't have that long. So let's actually kind of summarize this. There are different ways and different positives of each system. We can talk through all those, but we love to do that on these software comparisons is a bed by bin. Who would we want to stick with? Who would we love working with? Who do we see the future with? And who do we think, actually, I just want to scrap that? And I'm going to come to you, as I always do first, John, and go, who are your bed by bin out of the software we talked about?
So I think my bed is probably still Xero. Again, if you're probably a QuickBooks Intuit user, you might be going, oh, well, that's my preference. And I think that's an entirely valid choice. But, I'm most familiar with Xero. It works for me. And so that's definitely one that I would bed. In terms of buy, it's got to be free agent. I think they're really shaking the space up at the moment. I did, of course, in the good old days before NatWest bought them and RBS Group bought them, I was a shareholder, because they did go through a big funding round that was open to the public a while ago, and that was very nice. So it'd be nice to buy them a little bit back anyway, and hopefully make something out of that again. And then in terms of bidding, it's got to be Sage, I'm afraid. they're still just not at the races as far as I'm concerned in terms of not just functionality in general, because as we said, that's kind of there, but in terms of being able to take a product that can do so much more. And it's just a frustrating place for me to be in terms of looking at that product. And also, I don't think it looks particularly nice as a product. So, from a point of view of like contrasting it with other products in the market, which do look nice and do engage me, I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah, no, all valid comments. And I guess if I come to my bed by bin, I'm the same on Xero. Although Xero have frustrated the heck out of me for the last 4 or 5 years, I still see that as the market leader. They are the system I'm essentially in bed with. That's the system that I work most closely with. From a buyer perspective, I'm actually slightly different here. And that's on something I've not talked about, which is AI. I think that Intuit and QuickBooks Online have a massive opportunity with AI. And so I would be going in with QuickBooks Online from a buyer perspective, although I don't think I'm getting that quite cheaply, considering how big that product is. And then from a bin, for me, it's cash flow. I for some reason, passionately hate trying to work with that system. I know that is just subjective, but whenever I've tried to work with it in any way, I've just got very frustrated. So yeah, unfortunately for me, it's cash flow. But I think that I guess analysis, that review is a perfect way to finish this week's show. Hopefully, this episode has provided you all with valuable insights that you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes for links for the Digital Disruptors, SB Digital, and all of the software we've talked about in the show. If you want to catch any future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for the release every Thursday morning. And we look forward to speaking to you next week.